This is how to read Anoche, cuando dormía by Antonio Machado, translated by me. Last night, while I was sleeping, I dreamed blessed vision that a spring flowed inside my heart. I said, "Where's the hidden stream bed, O water, that you come to me, you fountain of new life? I have yet to taste." Last night, while I was sleeping, I dreamed blessed vision that I had a beehive inside my heart, and the golden bees were building out of my old bitterness pure white wax and sweet honey. Last night, while I was sleeping, I dreamed blessed vision that a bright sun blazed inside my heart. It burned because the heat of my red home. It was the sun because it shone and because it made me cry. Last night, while I was sleeping, I dreamed blessed vision that it was God who I had inside my heart. Antonio Machado was a Spanish poet, died in 1939, and is renowned in among Spanish poets from Spain, just partly because he's deeply influential, partly because he's just a dang good poet. Let's look at the main poem for today, though. Last night while I was sleeping, or Anoche, cuando dormía. There are 4 stanzas to this poem, and there's strong repetition. The structure and the words are the same in every one. The first 2 lines of every stanza, "Last night while I was sleeping, I dreamed blessed vision." All 4 stanzas begin the same way. And then there is a line which varies each of the 4, followed by "inside my heart." "Inside my heart" ties up and finishes that, what am I looking for? It finishes the, that last line, "inside my heart," it finishes the thought that begins, "Last night while I was sleeping, the blessed vision," and the vision is always something in his heart. And there's 4 things. First, a spring. Second, a beehive. Third, a sun. And fourth, God. But the structure alters a little bit beyond that, right? Those first 3 stanzas, we have, let's look at the second one, for instance. "Last night while I was sleeping, I dreamed blessed vision," the repeated lines, "that I had a beehive." The line is unique to the 3rd stanza, and then a repeated in all the stanzas, the 4th line, "inside my heart." Following that are 4 lines. In this case, it's, "and the golden bees were building out of my bitterness pure white wax and sweet honey." In the first 3 stanzas, there's those 4 tailing lines at the end. The final stanza, though, just ends with "inside my heart," which leads me to make this poem a very religious poem. I mean, obviously it does invoke God, but also note how it works. Those first 3 things, the spring, the beehive, and the sun, these are metaphors. And we've got 3 metaphors, and the last one feels like it's the cause. This is Machado telling us, what is God? Well, God is the sun, God is a beehive, and God is this spring. Now, let's look at each of these metaphors just briefly. The first one, the spring that flows inside of his heart. And what's the key characteristic of this spring? It's that it's hidden and he can't quite access it. It's inside of him, but despite the fact that it's inside of him, it is inaccessible to him. So he calls it a hidden stream bed that he has not yet tasted. It's a fountain of new life. It's within him and yet inaccessible to him. In the second stanza, it's a beehive. And what does the beehive do? It's an element of transformation. It takes his bitterness, something dark, something bad, and turns it into something positive. He turns it into pure white wax and sweet honey. Pureness, whiteness, and sweetness are all transformed from the bitterness that he has within his heart. In the third case, it's a sun. Now we have a spring that can't be accessed the first time. The second time, the second stanza, we have the beehive of transformation. And this third one, we have a sun, and it's a sun of longing. It's a sun of nostalgia. It's a sun of his home. So he says it blazed, it burned, because it is his home. His home burns within him, it blazes within him. He feels that longing, that connection, in his case, to Spain. And it is bright, it's clear, and it makes him cry. And then finally, the last stanza, he has within his heart God, period, and it ends there. There's something very sensual about this poem. All of these images, even though they're metaphors and they're dealing with abstractions, he anchors them to something very concrete, something very, something very relatable. A stream bed, a beehive, the sun. Then when he takes that last one to God, something which I cannot see, I cannot touch, I cannot describe visually, I don't use my senses to interact with. But the first three I do, I can. And so he is giving us essentially three metaphors of God inside the poem. One of the things that we might take away as a technique from this poem is not just to notice that there are repetitions, that's obvious. But notice where he breaks the pattern. In this case, it's clear he breaks the pattern in the fourth stanza. We get the trailing, the trailing, the trailing, and the nothing. When we look at other poetry, sometimes the repetition is a little harder to find. It's more hidden. It's more, abstract. It's more subtle. It's more underground. And not all poems have obvious repetition. But when we do find that repetition, pay attention to it and think about not just note that it's there. That's the very high school move that frustrates people about poetry. They say, great, I identified that there's a rhyme scheme. I identified that there's rhythm and meter. But you haven't asked the question of why, what's it doing? And that is part of how we read a poem. We find what the poet does and then ask why the poet did it. Let's think about that as we read one more time Antonio Machado's poem, Anoche, cuando dormía. Last night while I was sleeping, I dreamed, blessed vision, that a spring flowed inside my heart. I said, where's the hidden stream bed, O water, that you come to me, you fountain of new life? I have yet to taste. Last night while I was sleeping, I dreamed, blessed vision, that I had a beehive inside my heart, and the golden bees were building out of my old bitterness pure white wax and sweet honey. Last night while I was sleeping, I dreamed, blessed vision, that a bright sun blazed inside my heart. It burned because the heat of my red home. It was a sun because it shone and because it made me cry. Last night while I was sleeping, I dreamed, blessed vision, that it was God who I had inside my heart.